Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for two Facebook groups, Fans of Serif Software and Affinity Designer and Photo Group. Now I'm sure all of us at some point have seen an image like this where you have a sort of slogan of some sort that's over half of an image and the image below is shown through the text. So this is the sort of thing we're going to try and create now. Now this was a Photoshop tutorial which was on one of my magazine CDs, but when I watched it I thought to myself, I think I've seen that before done, so I had a quick look on YouTube and I found this one by Affinity Jack. The commentary is in German but there is English subtitles running along the bottom, and in this one he's sort of going for a black panel over here and a much sort of darker image, and it does do it in slightly a different way to the Photoshop tutorial that I'm going to adapt. So I think there is not too much overlap and there is room on YouTube for both versions of this sort of tutorial, but I do recommend that you watch this one as well, because you may prefer to do it this way rather than the way that I'm going to do it. So coming back to Affinity Photo, this is the start image which I got from Pixabay.com, and I will add a link to this image and to Affinity Jack's video in the description for this tutorial. So the first thing I'm going to do is to duplicate this background layer, and you don't have to do this, I'm just doing this for a later comparison. So I have my copy of the background image, and to this I'm going to add the adjustment, and I'm going to add a black and white adjustment. Now if you watch Affinity Jack's video you will see that he uses the HSL adjustment and lowers the saturation, and he does say in the video that you can use black and white, but he didn't need to on his particular image, so it depends on your image. I'm going to use black and white because the background will go quite white, and because it's so white you won't really see much of that text background coming through the text. So I'm going to adjust the color sliders slightly so there is some sort of color and texture in the background so that it will show through, so that more grey than white. So I will leave that at that point. I have not made a note of this, and each time I've done this it's come out slightly differently, but depending on whichever image you're using you can use whichever settings you like. So coming back to the layers panel, what I'm going to do now is to duplicate this adjustment. So just right click, come down to duplicate, or you can use Ctrl and J. Now this won't have any effect at the moment, but when I change the blending mode to screen it will make that a much lighter and brighter image. You can lower the opacity just to sort of knock back some of that effect. I'm going to go for about 60% roughly, that'll do. And the next adjustment I'm going to add is a curves adjustment, and as you can see here the pixels are sort of mainly down here in the lighter whiter end of the spectrum because there is more white here than black. So I just want to sort of bring back some sort of contrast, so I'm going to put an anchor point in the middle here, and then when this vertical and horizontal line meet here at bottom left I'm just going to put an anchor point in there and drag it down just a bit to the bottom, just to get a bit more contrast in the image while still keeping it fairly bright. And as you can see, we had this sort of S shape going on, so I'll just close that. So the next thing I want to do is to add a new layer above the curves, and the new layer button is this button here, so you just click on that and then we'll add a new pixel layer, and it is to this that we are going to add the white block that covers half this gentleman's face. So we want the rectangular marquee tool and just come to one of the top or bottom corners and then just draw out the marquee until you're at the bottom, and then just put the line going down the center of the face like so, and come to the flood fill tool, and my foreground color is white, and then I'll just click in there to fill that side with white. So I'll just press Ctrl and D to get rid of the selection area. In fact, I didn't come down far enough with my selection. Let me just use the move tool and drag that down a bit. Wasn't paying attention there. Right, moving on. Next we're going to sort of add the text. So I'm going to come to the artistic text and I'm going to click on this A icon over here, and then we have options up here, and one of them is character. I'm going to click on that to open the character panel, and from here you can select, all sorts of things like the size of the type, which type you're going to use, and what have you, font I should say. So font wise, you want to pick one that is sort of really quite thick, and what I'm going to use is this Basic Sans Heavy. I'm going to use it in bold, and I'm going to start off with a font size of about 36 points. Now I'm also going to, well, it's still set from when I last did it, the leading override. That is how much gap there is between one line above and the line below it. So I've got mine set on 36 points, which is already one of the options with the drop down menu. And another one is tracking, which I believe is this one here. Again, it's sort of how much space there is between one letter and the next. In the Photoshop tutorial he went for -25, but I found that the letters were a bit too close, so I would suggest maybe -5, -10. A lot of it depends on your font as well, but I'll try -10. And the color, font color is black. We will be changing this in a minute, but we'll leave it on black at the moment. And then just click somewhere on your white area and start typing your slogan. Now the slogan will depend on the picture and what it is you want to say. As this was an older gentleman, I was going to go with something about age. Now I don't know whether this is a quote I've heard or read somewhere, or whether it's partly what I've heard and partly what I've made up. I don't know, but this sort of came into my head. And also at this point I will say that to press the caps lock button on your keyboard till you type in all in caps. There should be a way with the character panel to turn on all caps, but I've yet to work out how these light up, so I will just press the caps lock and do it that way. And so I would do age is a, you don't necessarily want really long lines of text, so try and keep your text lines quite small. Yeah, see, that one's too close. Let me go back and change this. Oh, the leading override somehow dropped down to 7. It was on 36. Don't know quite how that happened. Let me try that again. Right, so once you've written your slogan or whatever it's going to be, you should then have this bounding box around the edge here, and then you can just resize that. And if you come to the move tool, also you can move it around as to whichever way you want. Now, depending on whether you put your white box on the right or the left, you can also alter whether this justifies to the right or to the left. Mine is set to the left, so it's all starts down this edge, whereas in Affinity Jack's video, he had to move it over to justify on the right. So I'll just make this slightly bigger. There we go. Right, let me just close that character panel. And what I'm now going to do is to add some effects to this text. So I'm going to come down here to the FX button and click on that, and then we'll open up the layers effect. And what I'm going to do is to add outer shadow. So I'll put a tick in the outer shadow box and also click on outer shadow word, so I have the options for outer shadow. I will leave the blending mode on multiply, and for now I'm going to leave that opacity on 50%, because I'm going to move all of these 3 sliders to roughly the same point as that 50% thing, just as a rough guide. And I'm going to leave the angle at 315, so the shadow is coming down here, down to the right. And from that start point, I'm just going to increase the intensity and the opacity of that shadow. I made the opacity about 70%, and I'm happy with that as it is. Now, one thing I need to do now is the fill opacity. I'm going to drop that down to 0. So that will take the colour out of the text, but we're just left with the drop shadow there. So I can now close that. And the next thing we want to do is to this top text layer. You need to hold down the control key on a PC, and I think it's a command key on a Mac, you hold that down and click on the actual icon rather than the layer. Just you click on the icon. That text will now be selected. And then if you click on the white pixel layer below, just to highlight it, so that is what we are working on now, and then come down to mask layer and click on this icon, it'll add a layer mask. Now this is currently a white layer mask and we need a black layer mask, but first what we need to do is press Ctrl and D to get rid of that selection area, and then just press Ctrl and I to change that layer mask from a white one to a black one. Let me just come off the move tool. So as you can see now that is the text coming through the image, through this white panel showing the image underneath. So the last thing I would do is I will just crop this and just so to get rid of some of this excess white on the sides. And what I'm also going to do is I'm roughly going to keep these two eyes, as you can see them here, in between, roughly centered in between these two central vertical lines. Just about there, I think, and then just double click in the middle, and that is the end of the tutorial. All we need to do now is to save the file or export it as a JPEG or TIFF or whatever. And this was my earlier version, which is a much lighter, brighter one, and this is a sort of more darker one, which I think I prefer. The text size probably would have helped being a bit bigger, but you do see where I'm going, and as you can see, because I had this slightly darker background, the text stands out a bit better. It's not because it's not a white background. So hopefully this is different enough from Affinity Jack's tutorial that they both work well together. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.